These are just some comments on the recent exchanges between Hythloday, Inmendham and Inventive Harvest on the subjects of value and the Benatar asymmetry. I'm a bit behind with some of the videos, so this might be a bit out of date. But so this is mostly directed towards Hythloday.
So I thought I'd do another little short on the importance of value question. Inmendham makes the point quite correctly that if anybody finds a particular conclusion totally ridiculous, then one should be careful and scrutinise the logical reasoning behind that conclusion. Be extra careful and check that you've not made any mistakes. This is good advice. Since the logical conclusions of absolute value is we need to annihilate all life on planet Earth, I suggest a little bit of caution. I watched a video about antinatalism, about the Benatar argument, and it struck me, and I don't know why it hasn't struck me before, that if, as Inmendham contends, absolute real value is created with a sentient organism, then how is it that in the Benatar table of accounting shown by Inmendham that I dealt with for a while, that in the category of non-existent states we're able to attribute a value, a good, a +1, to something not being harmed, i.e. not being brought into existence. I just show you the table. This is the table as I understood Inmendham to present it way back in the day. This is the table. This is the table that Glynos represented, and you'll see here in the never exists column that even though we have no existence of sentience, we somehow get a positive good value. So what is to prevent me saying this and dismissing this as yes, but it's not real value?
For the same reason that you wouldn't say that it was okay to drive your car while you're drunk, because there aren't any people lining the road yet. So for absence, maybe read prevention.
I think this is quite a knockdown blow to Benatar's argument, in the face of, if it is true that that the only real or absolute value is that of the creation and the feelings of existing sentience.
No, I think you've missed the you know, you were talking about examining the logic. If the conclusion appeared absurd, I don't think you put your finger on it. Where I think the extension of Benatar to the whole biosphere, where it goes wrong, is it's not that the Benatar asymmetry itself is wrong. If you accept it as is, you know, that the absence or prevention of pain is a good thing. The prevention or absence of pleasure for things that don't yet exist is not a bad thing. Then I think, you know, somebody like myself at least can quite happily agree that that would apply to me, and that it's universal in the sense that it applies to every other sentient individual that has ever existed, because they're substantially similar to me in terms of that they're a feely thing. So yeah, I might agree with an antinatalist about the Benatar asymmetry as it stands, that, you know, it applies to an individual, and that it's universal in the sense that it applies to all individuals. But it's still worth asking, and still remembering that it is a very individual-centric table, the table you've put up there. And so, but and it might apply universally in other senses, but it might not. And I think it's worth asking the question: where does it apply, and where it doesn't? And what occurs to me is that if instead of looking at how the asymmetry pertains to individuals, we look at an economy of individuals in this game, both existent and potentially existing in the future. That, you know, this asymmetry thing runs into problems, and that the absence of one individual's pain becomes the presence of pain of others. I've argued this in various ways over the last couple of years, but it's apparently not immediately obvious. And I suppose one way of looking at this is that perhaps the focus of antinatalism is on the reproductive aspect, obviously, hence the name. But I think that perhaps forgotten along the way is the fact that reproduction, though a necessary condition for this, for an antinatalist, this unpleasant situation to continue, it's not a sufficient condition, and that what ultimately limits the amount of the quantity of suffering in the world, the number of animals capable of suffering in the world, is limited not by reproduction, because all organisms have intrinsic rates of increase that are positive and that would lead to exponential growth under those conditions, but the limits of resources and limits of space, limits of energy availability to configure those resources. So if we you know, to I don't know, drive home the point about the lack of efficacy, if you like, in the novel reproduction, is to sort of consider, you know, the flip side of you know, 1,000 baby sea turtles required to make sure that one reaches adulthood, is that you really only need one adult sea turtle to out of those 1,000 to populate the world. So, you know, a budding antinatalist sea turtle could you know, fill his boots and make absolutely no impact on ultimately the number of sea turtles who are experiencing pain, pleasure, whatever, mass extinction events, which, you know, extraterrestrial impacts or something that perhaps knock the number of individuals on the Earth overnight down by, you know, substantially, and biodiversity down by perhaps millions of years, tens of millions of years, but probably only knock down the actual population of numbers of individuals actually living on the Earth. It probably might take only a decade to recover. So if we accept the Benatar asymmetry as is, accept the equivalency between individuals, okay, you know, their experiences of the world are going to be different, but in the particular, you know, the general aspect of being capable and actually feeling pain, pleasure, that sort of thing, in whichever way they do, that the vast majority of animals are in that position, and that should be considered equally, given equal consideration, put it that way. That we would have to apply that principle to this Benatar asymmetry as well, and so the fact that my non-children, that I don't have children, so you know, I could lord it over you, for instance, Hythloday, so that you know, you've been a naughty boy and I've been a good boy, but I don't see it like that, because the resources that my children would have monopolized and will have prevented other organisms of, if not equal value, of equal consideration, from coming into existence, and my not having those children, preventing pain in those individuals, my genetic offspring. Why should I favour, why should I have, there's no reason for me to give special treatment to my spawn over any other sentient organisms, because we've got this principle of equal consideration. I have, if you like, unwittingly, or beyond, it's beyond my control, unleashed a whole world of pain on organisms which would not have existed had I monopolised resources on the behalf of my own, genetic offspring. So I don't know. In summary, I think there's nothing particularly wrong with the Benatar asymmetry, but it only really applies. Well, it applies, I think, to individuals, the circumstance of individuals. It also applies to the circumstance of whether you were, I don't know, planning on seeding another planet. There need not be. There might be a planet sitting there that has no life on it, and it says it would be possible to terraform it and introduce life onto it. That would be another clear-cut example of where the Benatar asymmetry would say, no, you shouldn't do that. But in the state that we're in, the circumstances that we find ourselves on Earth, it's not so straightforward, and that if I'm working backwards from that. So if we can see that life is, although reproduction is important to the whole thing, the whole size of the harmosphere, if you want to call it that, is not limited by reproduction. It's limited by, say, resources and the amount of space available and energy flow and that sort of thing. That the prevention of one's own offspring, it prevents harm to those offspring, but it doesn't prevent harm, and unfortunately, and so if we look again at your table, the absence of pain is a good. We have to be pretty explicit in saying the absence of pain under these certain conditions, and that under other conditions that absence of pain is it's not bad, but it's not good either. It's pretty much a neutral, or at least we're going to have to consider more carefully what the economics are, and that if we, if we did have some kind of device to point at an animal and divine what their lifetime output of pain is, then we might discover that a large animal like ourselves is actually rather perhaps not such a bad deal, and that there might well be plenty of smaller creatures which would perhaps thrive more profusely in our absence. So anyway, I think I've gone on further than I wanted to. Yeah, so I don't particularly think that this absence of pain in things that are non-existent being a killer blow really holds up very well, I don't think. There are lots of things that we can quite accurately predict will happen in the future, and that those will have impacts on the individuals that are going to be around at the time, and I think the fact that pregnancy generally leads to childbirth is, falls into that camp, and we can't really claim that we don't understand that, and we don't understand that one thing leads to another.